Shwmae a chroeso I Sgwrs, podlediad Consortiwm Canolbarth y De. Yn y podlediad hwn byddwch chi'n clywed y trafodaethau diweddara am bob math o bethau addysg. Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the Central South Consortium podcast. In this podcast we'll bring you the very latest discussions on all things education.
Shwmae, hello and welcome to the latest edition of Sgwrs, Central South Consortium's podcast series. My name's Jasmine Walsh and I'm the Development Officer for English and Literacy here at CSC. In this podcast, we're going to be looking at building a culture of oracy in our schools and settings, and I am joined today by two practitioners from two schools in our region. I'm joined by Kate and Elliot from Corpus Christi Catholic High School in Cardiff and Rachel and Tom from Troedyrhiw Primary School in Merthyr Tydfil. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm the Literacy Coordinator and English teacher in Corpus Christi.
Hi, I'm Elliot. I'm Head of History at Corpus Christi High School.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I am Literacy Lead and Reception Teacher in Troedyrhiw.
Hi, I am Tom. I'm the Year 5 teacher at Troedyrhiw Primary School and I'm part of the SLT.
Thank you everyone, diolch. So as we know, oracy has been high on the agenda here in Wales for quite some time. I think we all saw the impact that the COVID disruption understandably had. And then in November 2021, the Minister for Education gave a statement confirming the absolute priority that he places on reading and oracy. At CSC, we've been pleased to work alongside Voice 21 for a number of years now. And for context, the practitioners that we're joined by today are midway through their journey on Voice 21's Leading a Culture of Oracy pathway. So today we're going to be talking about the underlying principles of oracy-rich teaching and learning and how Corpus Christi and Troedyrhiw have approached building a school-wide culture of oracy. And hopefully those of you listening today can take away lots of ideas and thoughts about how you might adapt these strategies to meet the needs of your own pupils, staff and communities. So firstly, can I ask both schools, what was it that made you come to the decisions in your different settings that oracy needed to be a priority? What sorts of things were you noticing around the school? Can we start with Troedyrhiw?
Of course, so during the pandemic, our school took part in the CSC team's professional development with the focus on vocabulary and oracy. This gave us the opportunity to evaluate how well and if oracy is being taught explicitly or whether oracy skills were just expected, so whether they were just being shoehorned into lessons. We considered the fact that we were relying on oracy skills to interact with our learners over Teams as well. So when school returned to business as usual, it was evident the lost learning and social interaction had impacted on our own entry assessments and our data in general. So our focus was on the well-being of learners and then being able to communicate their needs and emotion. For that was the most important part of returning, and for them to be able to articulate their needs well was really important, which made us want to focus on that element a little bit more then.
Thank you. And Corpus, was it similar for you or did you identify some different needs there?
Well, we started with Voice 21 before COVID and we sort of had an introduction to it because we recognised that it was important for pupils to feel that they had a voice and that they were confident in sharing the voice. But shortly after we started the journey, it was the pandemic, the schools closed down. So afterwards, we sort of really wanted to push it and really focus on it even more because I think we saw a real lack of confidence amongst the pupils. I think they'd spent so long at home learning online that they didn't feel comfortable to sort of share and speak and get things wrong. And Elliot, do you think the same?
Yeah, to build on what Kate said, I think as Kate mentioned, I think there was a real struggle with confidence after the pandemic. I think we often noticed our students in class at times struggling to formulate ideas through discussion, struggling to build on ideas, give examples to help explain their points. I think often they struggle to respectfully agree and disagree in debates, and also at times struggled with the listening side of oracy. That idea of listening to people's opinions and then building on that, I think they really struggled on. And again, I think, as Kate mentioned, that was probably from the pandemic side of listening through Teams with their face not on Teams, probably doing something different, to be honest with you. So that's what we found when they came back, obviously, into the classroom setting. So yeah.
Thank you. It's really interesting how both schools picked up on a need for oracy in order to sort of build confidence and well-being and the social emotional learning, as well as sort of using speaking and listening for their academic learning. The two go hand in hand, don't they? So that's really interesting. So what was your vision then? What was the vision for oracy? How did you start out in Corpus?
So we looked, when we sort of first started with Voice 21, we really looked at the school, where we were, what we had and what we were sort of missing. And we worked together to come up with our sort of vision statement as a school, which is to create an oracy-rich community where all members have the skills to communicate effectively, ask questions, and where every voice is valued. Because we wanted to place the emphasis, we want them to articulate themselves in academic settings, but also outside of the classroom, and hear those conversations in the yard, in the canteen, during sort of registration. And we looked for ways that we could sort of close that gap and make students more confident, both inside and out of the classroom. And we sort of started, when we first started with Voice 21, pre-COVID, we had a whole day inset with the whole of the staff, which was really good. We've trialed sort of loads of the techniques in all different settings. There was huge sort of staff buy-in. Everyone could recognise how much it was needed, how relevant it was, and how useful it would be for us and the pupils. And then obviously that lost its sort of momentum because we all had to teach in a completely different way. But since then, we've kind of come back. We've worked on it the last couple of years, and it's become part of our professional learning sessions that we do in school. It's something that we've worked with Voice 21, with 9 of the departments in the school, to embed Voice 21 activities into different schemes of work. I know Elliot did an incredible project last year with Year 8. I don't know if you wanted to say about that.
Yeah, so for me, as I said, the other head of department was firstly introduced to it pre-COVID, and then I took the role on. I think for me, as I mentioned, it was important, obviously, to build up that confidence in the classroom, and based on some CPD sessions that we did with Voice 21. And the rich resources they have on through their website, I think we wanted to gradually embed it, and I felt it lined perfectly with the new curriculum as well as our whole school TLAC kind of strategies that was introduced over the last couple of years. So we launched a Year 8 oracy project last year, which we've continued this year, which is last year's project was about whether Elizabeth was a great queen or not. So I think for history it lines in perfectly, because there's always the ability to debate and evaluate an important topic. So we looked at the physical side firstly of oracy, and the social side, developing group and paired activities using turn and talk tactics, using articulate games, really developing their confidence, where they would then go off and do an independent project where they would look at researching around that area, and then doing a voiceover on a PowerPoint or an Adobe Express presentation. And as I said, it was a real success. They really enjoyed that. And we found then that from that project launch, any kind of turn and talk, do now activities, they were using those kind of sentence structures whenever they turn and talk now, whenever they do discussion. And this year we've obviously had to change our curriculum. So we've linked it to our topic on the empire, the role of the empire, imperialism, and they're currently doing an oracy project on Ireland and the empire. So they're currently doing that now with a similar structure. And yeah, I think we've enjoyed it as a department, but I think the pupils have really enjoyed it as well. And as I said, linking back to that oracy kind of curriculum, the physical, the linguistic, the cognitive, the social and emotional, I think it just ties in perfectly from our department's point of view anyway. Yeah,
absolutely, Elliot, that sounds great. And as you said, it's the importance of teaching them to talk and giving them the strategies and the tools that they need to talk, and then they have that in their arsenal to learn through talk and learn all about the empire and through their conversations.
Yeah,
that's brilliant. Tom and Rachel at Troedyrhiw, what was your vision starting out?
So at Troedyrhiw, pupil voice is at the forefront of our curriculum. So with this in mind, our aim is to empower our learners with a voice that is able to articulate needs, communicate and develop as critical thinkers. We want our learners to feel heard, develop and respect for others in listening. So we aim to equip our learners with strategies to navigate a range of talking opportunities and challenges, preparing them for a wider world.
So what we did to begin with this, like I said before, we started the journey with CSC, CPD, online word matters and so on. But when we started, but just before we joined Voice 21, we started Talking Tuesdays. So we'd used the Voice 21 website, as you guys said, to develop a range of strategies. Now, after doing a bit of CPD with Voice 21, then the Talking Tuesdays ramped up a little bit then, where we adapted a couple of the strategies. For example, we used talking towers instead of the tokens, where we use Duplo blocks, and where the children build the towers as they talk. And then the children are able to actually see, oh gosh, I've really talked for 3 blocks per there, or oh my gosh, I managed to spread my discussion out throughout there. Then it allowed them to see who was taking over, who was really waiting till the end. But the idea is everyone had to spend their blocks. So that worked well across the school. There were other things that worked better in Key Stage 2, so your Harkness, your talk detectives and so on. We did talk in triads in upper Key Stage 2, whereas we did talk in circles in foundation phase. But we agreed a range of strategies that worked. And like you guys said, we learned to talk rather than through talk. As our journey progressed, we developed the learning through talk then. But basically the idea is we've shown our learners that we valued the importance of oracy in school. It was visible, it was everywhere. We had our guidelines developed all over in every classroom. Every classroom has an oracy wall, and we agreed vocabulary that we wanted our children, tier 2 vocabulary that we wanted our children to learn through our talk sessions. And very similar to Voice 21's Talking Tuesdays, every class had a talking point that was, so even though I say we learned to talk, there was a discussion point that each class had to enable that then. And with feedback from our staff, it just gave them a chance to practice and to play about. And there was it was one of those risk-free days. We did it on a Tuesday simply so that I could support classes, so that everyone was doing it at the same time. If I did a learning walk, I didn't have to kind of timetable it. I knew that first session on a Tuesday morning, they were going to be doing, we had agreed on talking circle, though they were going to do a springboard of some choice, and it just made it a lot easier. As time progressed, we realised then that we needed to broaden that. We worked on Talking Tuesdays for a good while, but that's when the curriculum pathway then worked for us the second year, where we were able to transfer that to learning through talk then.
Oh, that sounds fab. And all of you have done so much. It sounds like there's so much going on, but what you've really highlighted, I think, is the importance of identifying the needs of your school community, and then having a vision for what you would like things to look like, and then making a start and having a go and starting to teach some of these strategies that are going to enable pupils to achieve. So thank you so much for that. And you've talked a lot about sort of talk in the classroom, which is great. But when we talk about building a culture of oracy, we really are talking about not just what goes on in the classroom, but a school where oracy really sits at the heart of all aspects of school life. Did you find that this required a big shift in mindset in your setting, or was this something that fitted in quite well and quite naturally already with the established day-to-day life in your schools?
As Tom said, we Pupil Voice builds our curriculum in Troedyrhiw. But one thing that we do in Troedyrhiw is we already have a weekly assembly called an un-llais assembly. Tom, do you want to talk about us in Key Stage 2?
Yeah, so with the un-llais assemblies, every day there's a different assembly for different groups, and this is for everyone from year 2 up to year 6, and they all contribute weekly to like different aspects of school life. So we've got community champions, techno troops, funky fundraisers, and a nice example is with the techno troops, they're now presenting to grandparents and parents about internet safety. So through Voice 21, they've got the confidence now to present to a whole of 60 parents, 60 grandparents, which I don't think they would have done prior to the Voice 21 work. And our aim again is to improve this talk and ensure our learners can transfer their oracy skills to all aspects of life and learning. So like they're doing by presenting. Some of the techno troops are going around the school, supporting teachers, TAs with some aspects of like technology, so they might be more bit more confident with than some teachers.
So I think oracy assemblies was going to be our focus this year, and I thought it was a really good focus for us because we've already got a really strong start with our in-class assemblies. The way that the in-class assemblies actually work is they're introduced to an idea, and then the children are given the opportunity to collect ideas, and then they feed it back, so it goes into the school community then. We're a split site school, so the foundation phase, although we're on the same site, we're in a different building. Oracy assemblies are a little bit more tricky with the younger children, but we've started that now. So we've changed the way the children sit in the hall. Obviously it's exciting, isn't it, at the moment? So it's something that we are really working on. So behaviour changed, and it's a little bit more chatty. But the talk outcomes that we had out of it, children that might speak with really low volume knew that they had to speak loud and clearly for everybody to hear. So although we have daily assemblies even in foundation phase, previously it's just been lines, and they obviously we ask them questions, but this time they're given a sentence stem, they're given talking tactics to use, and building upon and so on, or I disagree. So that's really good. And with that in mind, you said about how is it already developed. When we're listening to learners, it's clear that the work they're doing is impacting on their oracy skills, but it isn't always transferred to other areas in the school. So it is something that we think we could develop more. So like assemblies are starting point, like I think you said earlier on, in the corridors, sending messages and so on, to make sure that those sentence stems are clear and the children are articulating what they're there for.
Thank you. Corpus, would you say that a sort of big shift was required for you in your school, or did it sort of naturally lend itself to more oracy-rich ways of working around the school?
I think we sort of started with pupil voice and teacher voice to sort of see where we were collectively and how valued pupils felt their voices were at this point, and how the level of recognition that teachers had, whether they thought voices should be valued more, or whether, hearing pupils articulate themselves and express themselves was an important part of their lessons. And the teacher voice, everybody that filled in that survey recognised the importance of letting pupils have an opportunity to be heard, to share sort of in a spoken way and to articulate themselves. And I think then it was easier to look at the curriculum, see where, people in subjects who maybe didn't think talk was central or talk was really part of their lesson. Well, actually, you do this activity, you have got this, and then fitting in. And I think that's the key thing. It was sort of fitting in Voice 21 rather than shoehorning it in, and thinking, that's a clear place where this Voice 21 technique or activity would really push the learners and really help them to progress. And I know sort of Elliot and I were talking about with TLAC, I don't know if Elliot, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I think I was going to mention as well, I think it's been embedded for a few years, as Kate mentioned before the pandemic. We obviously were doing like Talk on Tuesday, so we kind of launched it at that point across the whole of the school as a registration group. We only have about 15 minutes, but every Tuesday Kate would drop a topic where they debate. So they were learning that quite early on. I think, as Kate mentioned, Voice 21 has allowed us to, as a whole school, to shift that focus on on a more structured environment in terms of allowing teachers to create that environment for talk through do now activities. Obviously, we used to call them starters, didn't we? But it's a shift in focus where people know that there has to be a do now starter. The environment is far more structured, and I think that allows oracy to really flourish in the classroom. As Kate mentioned, it's already being done, but I think teachers now have those tools available to them. I think we as a subject, because I can only talk for history, we found it difficult at times to assess oracy, but we're working with Voice 21 on that actually tomorrow and looking at that as a key feature. But I also believe it has that immense value with the new curriculum. You know, that focus on really important subject areas where students can really discuss and evaluate through oracy. As I mentioned, the projects we're doing is Ireland and the Empire. In Year 7, we're launching something called the Conquest of Wales to England. But at times I think we found it difficult to prepare maybe and implement because of time. You know, I speak of that personally, but I know other teachers have found that quite difficult, especially with the pressures this year. But equally, as I said, it's a great shift. There has been a massive shift in making oracy more of a priority. And we're currently launching a podcast, which I know we'll probably talk about a bit later, podcast as a whole school, which has been pretty good as well. So yeah, there's a lot being done, I think.
I think you mentioned there, obviously you as a comprehensive school, you focus on history and you focus on literacy. I think something that that I don't know whether it makes it easier or harder really. Obviously, as a primary school teacher, we focus on all of the subjects, don't we? So what we did in our curriculum year is we worked on talk outcomes for different AOLEs. So we worked with our the development team to actually build different talk opportunities for, like, each term we focus on a different AOLE. So for example, in reception, in our maths we did instructional talk, in our carnival we did presentation, we've worked on guided reading and how Voice 21 can help us, and the progress made in the children's discussion for guided reading at the moment is amazing. But like I said, I don't know whether you're saying about the different talk outcomes, don't know whether us having the opportunity to talk over a wider topic helps us a little bit with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Rachel. I think it's integral to its success, isn't it, that we sort of don't see oracy as something that's perhaps just for literacy or just used in the English classroom, but is used across. And I think you're probably right in that is quite difficult to sort of structure in a secondary school setting when you've got lots of different subjects. And I know a lot of schools that have taken part in Voice 21 have started in perhaps one department or 2 or 3 departments, and then they're slowly sort of building that outwards then to get to that whole school culture. So that sounds like what's probably going on at Corpus. We've got this really strong base in English and humanities and some of the other subjects that we've mentioned, with a view to that becoming sort of underpinning teaching and learning philosophy then for the whole school and the new curriculum, which is great. So I wanted to ask, you've shared so much already of what you've been up to. For those listening that are thinking of trying to implement some of these strategies perhaps for the first time, have you got any practical tips or practical examples that you can share with us of how to go about building this culture of oracy? So for example, Troedyrhiw, you talked about your assemblies and you mentioned that perhaps there were some changes that need to be made with behaviour management, because suddenly we're asking children to talk and discuss in assemblies. Have you got any sort of practical tips or guidance for anyone that might be thinking of trying that for the first time?
I think be prepared that the actual assembly isn't going to go as smoothly. I mean, the children are pretty much trained for assembly, aren't they, to be facing the front. I think when you're as a school, we like to flip the classroom anyway, so we like to teach from different aspects of the aspects of the room. In assembly was a bit different because they always expect the teacher to be at the front. With regards to behaviour, I think making the expectations clear, having your in the in-class active assemblies, there is a pupil group that actually go around the room to make sure that the children are on topic, as well as staff, and there is the opportunity to feedback, so the children aren't expected just to have a chat, they are expected to feedback. With the foundation phase, what we've noted, obviously we just started with foundation phase, what we noted with that is that the discussion point needs to be very clear, so that the children know what they're talking about. It needs to be kept simple. If you try to make it fancy, it doesn't tend to work. And the sentence stems needed to be very specific to help them. Bearing in mind we have nursery children, so children ages of 3 join in that assembly as well. It has proven really successful in the sense of we have 3-year-olds sharing their opinions with children up to year 2. Obviously this is very one sentence, and then the year 2s are expected to build upon it then. But what I think something that I would change is at the moment they are sat in their class groups. So I think the thing we need to change is maybe mixing them up a little bit so that the older children can support those younger children who haven't got as much experience with their oracy skills. Would you like? We also do pupil meets as well, which is something we do. Do you want to talk?
Yeah. So in Key Stage 2 this year, we've introduced pupil meets, and this is to support the assessment process, and this is pupil-led. So with this, they have the chance to talk and discuss with their teacher. They look at work they're proud of, and then areas where they feel they need to improve. Pupils are able to identify them, how to move their learning forward, and then due to the work we've done with Voice 21, the discussion about high quality, it wasn't like teacher-led. The pupils were able to articulate their needs and their way forward, which is really good. And I think without the sentence stems they would have learned and practiced in class in the session, that wouldn't have been it wouldn't have gone so well.
I think parts what came out on our development day as well is something that we could build on that. Maybe a top tip if somebody wants to use that process is maybe get the children to develop a presentation of their targets before that pupil meet to support that discussion. We use Spark Page to develop the pupil meet, so the children's target setting is done there. But I think what we decided is maybe before the discussion, giving those children a bit of time to present their work, something they did well and something they think they need support in, might elevate that discussion a little bit further. So if anyone's going to use that, I would suggest that beforehand.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. Thank you. I love the idea that pupils are using these sort of newfound oracy skills to be part of their target setting, and they're reflecting on their progress. That's really powerful.
I think the end goal, I suppose, is that the children are involved in parents' evening, so that they are actually able to discuss their targets with their parents. Since I think we do the pupil meets 3 times a year. So I think we're almost there. We're almost ready for them to be able to to be confident enough to present in their parent consultations as well.
Yeah, and how wonderful for the pupils to feel like there's so much power in their voice, and that what they've got to say is important. Oh, thank you so much. Corpus, have you got any practical examples or anything that you've tried that you could share with us?
I think sort of in a high school, because this is so big, we've got sort of 1,100 pupils. I think my sort of biggest piece of advice would be starting small and sharing the progress as we go. So like Elliot said, we started with those sort of do now activities. So as a school, every lesson starts with a do now activity. When the kids come in, there's something on the board for them to do. And it was the idea that straight away we sort of put lots of 5-minute activities on Teams so everyone could see that would be relevant to all of the different subjects, so that people could just start using them as those sort of do now activities. It was little, it was easy to do, And then we sort of got pupil voice, got feedback from the pupils, how they felt, shared that with the staff. And then we got a bit bigger and we started to add, working with Voice 21, to add schemes of work into a variety of subjects. And then we've sort of built up to, I know Elliot mentioned, now we're doing a podcast, and that's a whole school podcast that we sort of did pupil voice. We had pupils from all the different age groups. How did they feel? How did they feel their voices were, were valued, were taken on board by us as teachers, but also the other pupils and their peers in the school. And the idea of the podcast was sort of born from that. And we have been working with, we've got a lot, haven't we, Elliot? We've got a lot of pupils who are really enthusiastic about it. They do a podcast. We've got a different group for each year. So there's a year 7 to 11 podcast group, and they record these podcasts. They're really, really good. They get shared with the whole year group. So their topic is sort of relevant to their year group on a Thursday and afternoon reg. And we sort of started it just before Christmas, and it was really, really good, really well received. And what we're doing this time, so they're recording them this week and last week, is having that podcast and having it end with a question. So the idea is that then they sort of, you listen to this 4-minute podcast or however long it is, and then the reg groups are left with the rest of the time to discuss that question. And I think that's the idea, that we're constantly building, we're constantly tweaking things, looking for feedback.
Yeah, I think to build on that, I think to not rush either. I think how we started, because as I mentioned, it's difficult with all the different subjects. I think Kate started firstly launching something that all teachers could do in a consistent way during reg and utilising reg time. So for us, it was launching that kind of Talk Tuesday day, so that pupils are learning the structure, learning the environment, learning how to talk and listen effectively. And then obviously from a subject point of view, using that and then linking it to do now activities and gradually introducing new ideas of talk. So for example, group discussion and kind of the rules involved with group discussion, potentially having one person as a moderator in a way, as a listener, and then paired talk. TLAC has supported us with that through turn and talk, that kind of phrase used by teachers and now understood by learners, that there's like rules to follow with discussion. And then for us personally then, while we've developed these strategies, being able to launch that project, which ultimately is a solo-based project where they're talking like an historian. So Voice 21 has those different subjects and rules for discussion on how to talk like an historian, how to talk like a person in geography. So we've looked at that and being able to build on what Kate's done as a whole school, what we've gradually introduced. As I said, it takes time. They're then confident to launch their own projects, which they've done last year. And I would say that Talk Tactics is a simple resource, is a great resource, because it's something you can just put on the tables. It's there continually. And whenever we then do an oracy-based activity, they can always look at whether challenging, there's a point to challenge, learning specific talk for that, whether to instigate, whether to summarize, whether to build on, and gradually then you're developing that confidence across the group. I think also it's important that students struggle with talk, and therefore developing that culture environment supports those learners and doing it in an effective way. And as I mentioned, through pupil voice, as Kate has mentioned, having that ability to listen to the pupils, what's worked, what hasn't, and continuing that from a subject point of view, I think has been important. Yeah.
Thank you. There's been so much really great advice given there, so thank you. I love the podcast idea. I think that's a really creative and innovative way of getting around, like you say, the challenges of a large school or setting where you can't bring all of the pupils together in an oracy assembly. So almost the talk has come to them in their form rooms. And I suppose even once they leave that afternoon reg, they could carry that conversation on, couldn't they, on the bus or on the walk home, because they've all talked about that same topic. And then I suppose what you said as well about, you know, oracy around the school and within the school culture going hand in hand then with oracy in the classroom, and the two sort of benefiting each other, because they're just developing those skills then that they can use in both environments. Oh, thank you. That was brilliant. So the last thing that I wanted to ask is about next steps. What are your planned next steps?
So we're sort of still on the developing that podcast and really promoting that. And I think the idea is we've sort of gone, you know, like I said, we've gone from the podcast to ending the podcast with a question so that classes can talk about it. I think the next idea, which is quite simple, but is to share it on our Twitter page and on our school website. So, you know, like you said, Jasmine, about they can carry on that conversation on the bus. The idea that when they go home, they could have that conversation at the dinner table, or when they come in and are talking to their parents. So there's that sort of development in talk, and hearing different people talk then as well. You know, their teachers, their peers, and their parents, or their brothers or their sisters, and really sort of developing that. And I think the other idea is sort of getting it embedded across, even though we've got it, you know, little bits across all subjects pretty much. I think is trying to build and make oracy more of a focus across the board. I don't know, Elliot, if you agree with that.
Yeah, I think for us it's definitely embedding it more from a history point of view to an ALE then with humanities. I think we are continuously involved in discussion as an ALE, so I think sharing good practice across the school through inset sessions and CPD. I know for us, I think it might be a school priority for next year, which I know our head of teaching and learning is very keen to make sure that maybe it's on our performance management targets through lesson observation is a key focus with that. I think also for me, as I mentioned earlier, assessment, how we assess oracy. I think from a secondary school perspective, I think the written word is always something that we feel naturally we assess, but I'd like us to be able to assess oracy, something that we're working with Voice 21 to you know, commit to success criteria and be able to give that effective feedback rather than having just to go back to a written assessment potentially. I think the dream is to have a radio station in school. I think we've talked about that. That's, I think, the development from the podcast. I think, you know, we're launching, as I said, a podcast once every 2 weeks to enable the 5 groups to have time to do their talks. I think a development on that then is them interviewing guests, teachers. I think listening to teachers speak helps learners understand kind of those rules of discussion. And I think finally then, what we want to do is obviously then continue those projects across the across the year 7, 8 and 9. So although we've launched it as year 8, I think year 7 and year 9 is our next groups then to launch that. And I think we're doing that this year. So yeah, I think that's from our point of view really.
On our development days, we decided to include a learning walk, and it was evident oracy is happening. The children are using talking tactics. They know the springboards are in place in planning. But what we found was the children weren't necessarily using the vocabulary from the framework. So that's what I think we need to work on now. And look, so what we've done is we've put the differentiated frameworks, reintroduced them to staff, making sure that so it's kind of like keeping on top of that CPD, because I think it's got to the point where our teaching staff are quite confident in delivering talking activities as well as talking through activities as well. So we found that although everything is visible in the classrooms, we needed a bit of CPD to remind them, that this is a physical and social emotional skill, this is a physical skill, and so on. And because the children didn't necessarily, not so much did they didn't know it, they weren't able to articulate that when we were having that discussion. I think the oracy assembly is something we've just started, so we'd like to continue that, especially with the younger children. I think the older children, we need to consider how how we're delivering it, whether it's a traverse or whether we want them in that talk detective role. But with the younger children, it is more so that getting over that excitement stage and, you know, using those talking STEM as using our strategies in there. I think it would be really lovely as well. What we decided is that at the moment a member of teaching staff takes the assembly, and the other teaching staff are obviously on task doing something else. I think it's a perfect opportunity for CPD as well. So we'd like our staff that are not so experienced or new staff to come and join, or even our experienced staff if they're struggling with a certain aspect, to come in to monitor these assemblies. And it would be lovely then to see those assemblies develop. So it's not just a oracy assembly. Maybe the eco assembly would be done via an oracy assembly, or the community action assembly would be done in the same format. As well as that, then we need to continue developing our curriculum. So like I said earlier on, we've worked, the way that we developed it, instead of doing a year group and looking at all AOLEs, we decided to look at whole school. Let's look at an AOLE, and so that's the way we've built it, so that all teaching staff are on the same journey. So we need to look at humanities next. that's our next step. And then so we've got a humanities focus on all of our topics this term. So that's where we're at the moment, to make sure that we've got a talk outcome in each year group for humanities then.
Oh, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been really inspiring to listen to you all talk today about the things that you've been doing. We look forward to keeping in touch and following your progress and finding out what happens next. And thank you as well to everybody who's listened to today's podcast. I'm sure you're already thinking about how the ideas shared could be relevant to your own settings. And just to make you aware, CSC have a number of blogs, case studies, and some professional learning centred around oracy available on our website, which is cscjes.org.uk, if you'd like to find out more. Diolch yn fawr, a hwyl fawr.
Bye.
Diolch.
Bye.
Bye.
Diolch am wrando ar y bennod hon o Sgwrs. Cofiwch ein dilyn ar Twitter a Facebook, tanysgrifio ein sianel YouTube, ymuno yn cymunedau ar ein gwefan a darllen ein bwletin ysgolion wythnosol am y newyddion diweddaraf. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sgwrs. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our online communities via our website, and read our weekly school bulletin for the latest news. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.